Hi guys, and welcome to Cultnomics. My name is Paul Hanley, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about optimum currency theory. In this video, we are going to examine the implications of an asymmetric shock involving two countries in a common currency area. The asymmetric shock in this case will affect Ireland as a positive aggregate demand side shock, so more spending for goods and services, and in the French case it will be a negative shock. So in Ireland we will have an increase in aggregate demand, so this will increase, whereas in France the aggregate demand curve for French goods and services is going to decrease. So how do we model this and what are the implications? Well, to model it, what we will do is we will draw our new aggregate demand curve in the Irish case, where aggregate demand shifts rightwards in our economy here, and we will just put this in as AD1. So this represents a positive increase in the demand for goods and services. This will generate a new equilibrium point, short run, which is above the long run equilibrium, and we call this an inflation gap. So with this inflation gap, as aptly named, we will see that price level has increased in the Irish economy due to extra demand, and at the same time aggregate demand has caused GDP to increase. So GDP 2 has increased to a higher level compared to GDP1. This is a short-term equilibrium where the economy tends towards long-run equilibrium over time. So in the Irish case, a positive shock. How do we represent in the French case a negative shock in aggregate demand? Well, again, we shift the aggregate demand curve, but in the French case we are shifting it downwards to the left. So our new aggregate demand curve is down to the left. We will call this AD2, and what this causes for the economy is the following. It has a new equilibrium point in the short run, as indicated. This point is to the left, therefore it is called an unemployment gap of long run aggregate supply. The price level has decreased to P2, so we expect the French economy to have a price level reduction, and at the same time the output level, GDP of goods and services, has also declined and decreased. So we have GDP2 decreasing to the left over here. So what are the policy options in place? Well, to tackle this and to eradicate the gaps in the economy between actual output and long-run output, in a common currency area with Ireland and France, we have an institution called the European Central Bank, or the ECB, and they control what we call monetary policy. So monetary policy in the economy over here, which involves the control of interest rates. So with monetary policy, what the ECB can do is either increase or decrease rates. Now, if we look over in the Irish case here, because prices have gone up and an inflationary gap has opened up, for Ireland, what is necessary for this economy to manage the economy and bring down the inflation rate is for the interest rate to rise. However, over in the French case over here with an unemployment gap and prices falling, what you need to do is inflate the economy. So in the French economy, what is necessary for the ECB to do is to drop the interest rate, to decrease it. Now, in the ECB and the common currency area in the Eurozone, what we have is just one interest rate. The ECB has only one interest rate to set. Therefore, it cannot set a different rate for Ireland and a different rate for France. So either way, the interest rate set is going to be bad for one of these economies over here and is going to cause the Irish economy to overheat if it's set too low, or it's going to cause the economy in France to contract even further if it is set too high. So in this situation, there is another automatic adjustment mechanism that could return the economies to their long-run growth. For the Irish case over here, for number one, if we go with Ireland, we have seen that the aggregate demand level has fallen in this case. So aggregate demand, has increased in the Irish case, Because it's increased, it caused the price level to rise. And if the Irish economy were out of this common currency area, if they reverted to their national currency, the automatic adjustment mechanism would be through the exchange rate. So Ireland used to have the pound or the punt as their national currency. When prices go up in that economy, the exchange rate, the value of the punt, the Irish pound, would tend to rise. It would appreciate in our terms. An appreciation of an exchange rate causes the export level of that economy to drop because the prices of your goods and services become more expensive internationally. Exports are a part of aggregate demand. Therefore, as exports drop, so too would aggregate demand, and therefore this would be an automatic adjustment, because with too much demand in the economy, aggregate demand would drop back because of the decrease in exports. So that would automatically reduce and eradicate that inflation gap. In the French case here, the opposite would happen. So in France, what we would tend to see is, in the French case, we have aggregate demand falling, so AD decreases. We know, because we saw, that this causes the price level to drop as well. If the French reverted to their national currency of the French franc, what would happen with a price fall is that, all else the same, their exchange rate would also fall. The French franc would depreciate. A depreciating currency causes exports to increase because your goods are cheaper on international markets, and because they've increased and are a part of demand, aggregate demand would increase, and therefore the decrease that we've shown on this graph would revert back to its short-run equilibrium and its long-run equilibrium. So both in the Irish and French case, if they had national currencies, they would be automatically regulated and would return to their long-run growth path. In a common currency area, monetary policy doesn't work if you have asymmetric shocks, and the automatic adjustment that we have indicated here of exchange rates also does not work, because there is only one currency for both of these countries, that is the euro. So in this case here, the only automatic adjustment mechanism left between these two economies is wages. And in the Irish case, when we see prices go up, the wage rate should also increase, and what would happen in this case is an increasing wage rate would cause the economy to an aggregate supply to shift back to the left. So in our case here, a leftward shift of aggregate supply would revert us back to long-run equilibrium. So we would have AS2 and a leftward shift of our supply curve. The only problem is GDP would return to equilibrium, but prices would go even higher. So in this case here, higher prices would be leading to uncompetitiveness for that economy. In the French case over here, if wages were to drop in this case because prices dropped and it's in a recession, well, what would happen is that would be a positive shock for supply, and what we would see is the supply curve would shift over here to the right. So we would have aggregate supply to a rightward shift, and that what that would cause is the economy to return to its long-run equilibrium, and the price level in this case would drop. So you would have a decrease in prices in that economy. Alternative policy measure to this might be austerity, and in this case what would happen is that in the Irish case, where inflation was too high, the government would have to reduce government spending and tax more, and this would revert it back to equilibrium through a demand shock and shift. Or in the French case over here, what would have to happen is an increase in government spending and a decrease in taxes to revert it from the recessionary point, from the unemployment gap, back up to its natural level. So fiscal policy could also be used as well as wages to bring the economies back to equilibrium in this case. I hope you call back to Cultnomics soon. Bye for now.